And the Shem tonight's share is Lili Nishmat, Kiskevin Nufal, Megam, Tuyabat Nufal. We'll Megam Marusa Bat Sarah. We'll have the B'chaim L'chaim. We're also learning the Refuat Shalema, Tinok Ben Natalie Hadassah, for a complete Refuah B'Karov. Okay, let us begin the shir over here. Tisha B'Av is coming up. I got a lot of halachot in Tisha B'Av. So the Gemara, we're going to start with the Mishnah. You look on page 303. Page 303 in volume 12. Rabbi Yosef, I have here for you a copy. You can pass it around. Yeah, Rabbi Menashe, you have page 303. We're going to start with the Mishnah. Mishnah Masechet Ta'anit. Perek Daled, Mishnah Zayin. Erev Tisha B'Av. The evening before Tisha B'Av. Lo yachal adam shnei tavshilin. You're not allowed to eat two cooked dishes. Lo yachal basar v'lo yishte yayin. He can't eat meat or can't drink wine. Okay, this is what the Mishnah says. Erev Tisha B'Av is talking about what's called a Suda Mafseket. You are not to eat two cooked dishes, no meat, no wine. The real mikar for no meat and no wine is Erev Tisha B'Av. Is a Suda Mafseket. What we Sephardim do and what Ashkenazim do, that we don't eat it from Rosh Chodesh or the day after Rosh Chodesh, this is a minhag. The Temanim, they still eat meat. Many Temanim still eat meat even today, up until Erev Tisha B'Av. Whether they should still be practicing like this or not, that's recently it was a machlok in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef said Temanim have to keep like the Sfaradim, and they have to not eat meat during the 9 days, starting from the day after Rosh Chodesh. But the Rabbanim of the Temanim, the Yemenites, they say, no, that's our minhag. We eat meat, and they eat meat. Because the Gemara says, the only time you can't eat meat is Erev Tisha B'Av during the Suda Mafseket. So the Mikar and the Shirish for that halacha is only Erev Tisha B'Av. We have expanded it to feel a little bit more pain, a little bit more sorrow, so therefore we do it throughout. Look at the Shulchan Aruch in source 2. Shulchan Aruch says, Erev Tisha B'Av, lo yachal adam b'suda mafseket, during the final meal, she'achlo acher chatzot. The final meal has to be after chatzot. It could be way after chatzot, but it has to be after chatzot. Basar, you shouldn't eat basar, v'lo yishte yayin, you shouldn't drink wine, v'lo yachal shnei tavshilin. You shouldn't eat two cooked foods. Remember, if you're about to go into mourning, and you're about to lose the Beit HaMikdash, and we know that throughout the 3 weeks and the 9 days, the mourning intensifies, it goes bigger and bigger, then when it comes right before the morning itself, you cannot be sitting at a banquet. You shouldn't have more than one cooked food. You shouldn't be drinking meat, drinking wine and eating meat. You have to get into the mode of feeling sorrowful and feeling mournful for the Beit HaMikdash. And that's what the Mishnah Berurah says. In source 3, Kidei leharbot avel v'liskor chorban habayit v'yitzta'er alav. In order to get more into mourning, to remember the destruction, and to feel in pain. That's why the Suda Mafseket has to be limited to what we said. Mishnah Berurah adds on page 304, and source number 4, the Mishnah Berurah adds on that during the Suda Mafseket, the Ein Lishtot Shecher, you do not drink beer, no beer. So although during the 9 days our minhag is not to drink wine, beer and other things we let. It's just wine we don't drink, or grape juice during these 9 days. But on Erev Tisha B'Av, during the Suda Mafseket, you're not to drink any type of alcohol. V'chol shechein, it says in Shar Tzion, v'chol shechein, the English thought made devash, shouldn't drink mead or other hard liquor that causes a person to become shikr. Sheishchach al yidei zeh chorban habayit. Because if you're drunk, you can't remember that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. When you're drunk, your brain doesn't work, and you have to remember it's a destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Therefore, you cannot get yourself drunk. I just want to add on, it's not in the Tzurba over here in the page that we're looking, but here in the Yalkut Yosef, he says, however, if someone must drink beer in order to get an appetite, he only can eat if he drinks beer. So here in the Yalkut Yosef, outside of this book that we're looking at, it says over here, someone who's accustomed to drink beer all year long for his appetite, he may drink beer even during the Suda Mafseket. Also, if someone is very weak, but if he drinks alcohol, he gets strong, then he's also allowed to drink beer during that final meal. So it's you definitely can't drink wine. Beer, you shouldn't drink beer either. But if it's a positive effect on you, then you could seem to be drinking beer, as long as you're not going to get into that state of shikr, of being totally forgetful, of not knowing what's going on. Says the Or L'Tzion in source number 6, right? This is Rabbi Ben Zion Abba Shaul Zechat Tzadik L'Bracha, Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul. He says, "V'chamo kain ein lishtot mashkot shel ta'anug kigon kola v'chadoma." You shouldn't drink sodas. You shouldn't drink sodas, in my opinion, all year. It's very bad for you, very, very unhealthy. Sugar content is unbelievable in there. But besides that, on Erev Tisha B'Av, it's not the time to start drinking sweet juices. Okay? Any time you're getting into a morning state, you have to feel like a mourner, and therefore you shouldn't drink those things either. All right. Let's take a look. Says the Shulchan Aruch Harav. Someone who wants to avoid spitting regularly in the shul should chew a sweet root called licorice before entering the shul. However, on Erev Yom Kippur and Erev Tisha B'Av, it's forbidden for the sweetness to remain in his mouth, such that when he swallows his saliva, he is swallowing the sweetness. So Shulchan Aruch Harav adds on and says, Erev Tisha B'Av and Erev Yom Kippur, you shouldn't have sweet things in your mouth during the day, right before the fast. This way, the sweetness should not remain in your mouth. Okay, so that's another interesting halacha. Okay, what about fruits during the Suda Mafsek? You said it can't have two cooked foods. What about fruits? So says the Torah, V'yirakot uperot mutar lefe behen hapat shenchayin afilu kamaminan. As long as they're fresh, you can eat as many fresh fruit as you want during the Suda Mafsek. It's not part of the two cooked foods. Says the Shulchan Aruch, afilu bashal min echad b'shtei kedarot mikre shnei tavshilin. Okay, if someone cooked one type of food in two separate pots, they're considered two cooked foods. So too, if you have two different types of food cooking in one pot, you should be careful. Unless this is the way it's prepared. Just like if a person would prepare certain types of food, which he puts onions and eggs inside. So that's what we were saying this morning, that oshiplov. Let's say I want oshiplov, and I put in there's rice, there's carrots, there's eggs. How many cooked foods are that? Is it one cooked food or is it two cooked foods? If it's two cooked foods, you can't eat it. So the Shulchan Aruch says if that's the way you usually cook that food throughout the year, then it's considered one food. One food has many different pieces to it. So it's not just the rice is one and this is one. If you cook them separate, that's a problem. But if you always cook them together, then that's considered one food. Says the Mishnah Berurah, he says, for example, the example is you put onions and eggs in the peas, because people usually do that. They fry the dough with them. But fish, you never really put eggs with fish. No one takes eggs and puts it on the fish. So now you want to cook it together and say, oh, it's one food. No, that doesn't work. So if it's the derech to cook it that way, it's one food. If it's not the derech to cook it that way, then it's not one food. And then you can't eat it because it's more than one. Okay, that's the halacha there. Says the Yalkut Yosef on source 11. Says as follows. You're not allowed to eat two cooked foods. And even if you cooked one type of food in two pots, and one of them is hard and one of them is soft, right? Let's say you have the eggs. You cooked eggs, and you cooked eggs in two separate pots, and you made one hard-boiled eggs, and you made the other one soft-boiled eggs. How many foods is that? One or two. So, this is considered two cooked foods, because one is hard-boiled and one is soft-boiled. Okay? But if you're cooking in two pots, because you have a lot of people to cook for, and you need a lot of. Today, I had the opportunity to make for my children mac and cheese. Okay, so my wife said make a lot of macaroni so they can have it for tomorrow too. So when I finished boiling the macaroni, I had to pour it out, and I already realized it's not going to fit in one strainer because we don't use milk so much. You have a smaller milk strainer, so I had to take it straight in and put it in another pot, and then put it in another pot. So I had two pots, but I had two pots. Why I had two pots? Not because I wanted to cook it in two separate pots, but rather I didn't have enough space in one pot. So says the Yalkut Yosef that if you have the food cooked in two pots, but it's in two pots because the practicality of it isn't in two pots, then that's not a problem. That's not considered two different foods. One is hard and the other is soft, enough to be gulped. These are considered like we said, one hard egg, one soft egg. That is considered two separate foods. Okay, that is considered two separate foods. Let me just see what I wanted to mark down over here. Okay, we talked about baked goods. Baked goods are not considered a cooked food, so you can eat as many baked foods as you want during the Tzurba second, like we mentioned, but you still shouldn't have a whole array of pastries. Shouldn't be eating donuts and cinnamon buns and whatnot during the Tzurba second, but you technically could because they're not considered cooked; they are baked. Here in the Avram, you have a question?
Yes, can I have just one hard-boiled egg and kazayat of bread?
Can I have one hard-boiled egg and what?
Kazayat of bread or kabetza? Bread.
You want to have, during the Tzurba second, you want to have a hard-boiled egg.
Correct.
So if you have a hard-boiled egg, that's already your one cooked food. You can't eat any other cooked food. You could have bread because bread is not cooked; it's baked.
Look.
You can have water, sure. That's not cooked food. Okay, very good. Is that correct? That's correct. We're gonna talk about that. This is the din of Tzurba second. We'll talk. We're gonna get into all of that. I promise to get into it. Says the Shal Shuva or Letzion. Shayla. Question. Someone has a vegetable soup, or someone's making shakshuka. Okay. Is it permitted to eat them at Tzurba second? Shakshuka, everyone who's been in Israel or knows Israelis, it's a cooked dish of tomatoes and eggs. It's very yummy. Okay. It's permitted to, is it mutar to eat shakshuka during the Tzurba second? It has tomato and eggs, it's two separate. So he says
it's made as one all the time.
So regarding vegetable soup, which has several types of vegetables, or shakshuka, these are considered, like Makil said, nichshavim tavshil echad. It's one food because that's the way it's usually cooked. So mutar le'ochlam b'Tzurba second. It's mutar to eat it during the Tzurba second. So the din, whether a food is one or two, is this the derech to usually make it or not? All right, now Piskei Tshuva says an interesting hara over here. He says, what about a dairy food that has gone through the pasteurization process, pasteurized, right? What's that? They bring it to a certain steam. They make it to kill off the bacteria. Is that considered cooked now or not? So it says the Piskei Tshuva, no, it's not considered cooked because you're not steaming it to cook it. You're steaming it to get rid of the bacteria. And it's not to the same level as cooking. Therefore, if you have a dairy product that undergoes a process of pasteurization in order to eliminate bacteria, this is not included in the category of cooked food. It has to really be cooked. Okay, right. Then the Yalkut Paskins, the same thing. Butter is also not considered a cooked food. All right, we talked about that. Now, Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, source 14 on page 306. Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, Kach yeh minhago shel Yehuda Rabbi Eli. This was the minhag of Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eli. Erev Tisha B'Av, mevin lo pat karva b'melech. He would bring stale bread with salt. V'yoshev vein tanur likirayim, and he would sit between the oven and the stove in a very disrespectable place in the house. No one wants to sit there. V'ochel, and he would eat. V'shota aleya kiton shel mayim, and they would give him a jug of water. And he was acting as if someone was dead in front of him, meaning as if someone dies in the family, how your mind goes crazy. You can't think. You just want to be alone. You just want to be, you want to even punish yourself, so to speak, when something happens in the family. That's the way a person should be acting without his mind working. He should be acting in a very not respectful way. Treat himself not so well, sit in a bad place, sit down to the ground. I remember when I was in camp, it was Ashkenaz camp, Camp Oshaga, yeshiva camp up in the Catskills in Ellenville, New York. And what we did was, Ashkenazim have a minhag to eat their bread with ashes on Erev Tisha B'Av. So we went out into the campgrounds. We took a big bowl, filled it with paper, and then we burnt it. We lit it on fire. And then we took it into the camp, and everybody would come around with their bread and dip it into the ashes and eat the bread with the ashes during the Suda Mavseket. We're not knowing that way, but Ashkenazim are knowing that way. If you want to do it, there's nothing wrong with doing it. In order to help you to have a zeichel churban, in order to remember what the destruction was about. Says the Shulchan Aruch, source 15, Misha Efsherlo, who's possible, lo yachol Suda Hamaseket, he shouldn't eat too much of the Suda Hamaseket, elapat chariva b'melech v'kiton shel mayim. You should really only have bread and water. That's to show it's a Suda Hamaseket. Now, this is the Ramah. So Hagar, Ramah. Yesh machmirim l'tavel achar chilason pat be'efer v'lochlo. To dip the bread into ashes and eat it. It's my favorite Ramah. That's why the Ashkenazim do this. And this is based on psukim. That's why they do it. And says the Shulchan Aruch in the next sif, Nahagu liyeshiv al gabi karka v'sudam hafseket. Already during the sudam hafseket, so already before Shkia, when you're having the sudam hafseket, you should eat it while sitting on the floor. You should eat it while sitting on the floor. You have to eat it while sitting on the floor. You should eat it in the floor. It's too hard for you. You can sit in something a little bit higher, with less than 3 tvachim, but you have to eat it 2 seconds on the floor. Sudam hafseket is eaten on the floor.
There's no brachot, right? To be said.
There's no special brachot. There's a brachot on what you're eating. But you eat it on the floor. Kafa Chaim. Kacha Chaim writes, let's say he really can't sit on the floor. He's very old, very weak, can't sit. So then what he should do? He should change where he usually sits. Meaning if you usually sit at the head of the table, you can't sit on the floor because of whatever physical problems, you can't do it. So you shouldn't sit at your same place at the table. You should sit somewhere less respectable, in the doorway or somewhere next to the oven. Take your seat and sit somewhere away from the table to show that that you're in the middle of mourning and the Suda is a Suda Mavseket. You should sit separately. You don't have to sit. You should not sit together, especially if you're going to create a zimun. If you're not creating a zimun, you could sit together. And you should start sharing already some of the, you should start making what I like to do, if Hashem gives me the kolach, what I like to do during the Suda Mavseket, I would start to act very sad and tell the kids about what we're doing on Tisha B'Av, let them talk a little bit what they heard, explain to them what it means for people to die and be killed, and for the Beit Mikdash to be destroyed, and how Hashem went into Galut, and the Shekhinah went into Galut, and all these things. You get them into the mode. You know, you have to break them in. Each one according to their age. I just want to mention a few quick things over here that he brings in the Yalkut Yosef outside of the Tzurba. For a moment, you're going to look outside. Woman must sit on the ground too to eat the Suda Mavseket. Okay, women too have to sit on the ground. Not to eat in groups. It's best that 3 men avoid sitting together. This way they don't have to perform zimun. It's not a time of companionship. You have to be sitting alone and feeling upset and hurt. And this is some of the halachot of Suda Mavseket. Okay, says the Shulchan Aruch in source 17, calls that all this that we talk about, B'Suda Mavseket. It's the Suda Mavseket. What does that mean? She'en da'atol le'ochol od ahareya sudat keva uchshu ahar hatzot. It has to be after hatzot, and this has to be your mind that this is the last Suda that I'm eating today. Last se'udah, not the last thing I'm eating. The last se'udah that I'm eating today. Avamaya koidem chatzot. But if you ate it before chatzot, or after chatzot, but that's also suda kava, or after chatzot, but you're thinking I'm gonna eat another suda after this, then it's not considered suda kava. Then you don't have to worry about these things because this halachot is just for suda mafseket. Right. What? So you're being you're kaveh suda. You're eating. If you're considering this as your suda, then it's your. Okay.
Is it a must to have a Suda Masakit?
Yes, you must have a suda mafseket.
And if one didn't do it, then what?
One didn't do it. It's not he's not over an aver of not eating a suda mafseket, but the minhag is to eat the suda mafseket. Okay. Panini halacha was talking about Rabbi Yosef, what you mentioned about what you learned on Shabbat. But minhag and mikubal, the minhag that's accepted, shalechem b'tzahorayim suda regila im kamov tavshilim. That during Thursday or Wednesday, it's going to be Wednesday this year of Tisha B'Av. So Wednesday during the afternoon, early afternoon, we eat a big suda. All right, you make plov with the eggs and the potatoes. You make whatever other food you eat, it's fine. Velikrat hatzom ochlem, velikrat hatzom ochlem at the suda second uvotav shel echa bilvad. And then, as the fast is getting closer, now you eat the suda second. So you eat well beforehand, and then you make another suda, and that's the suda second. Now, there's an interesting idea, is that in the truth. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, and then we'll take a look at the Algos. Let's take page 308, source 19. He tends to eat another proper meal thereafter. But if he eats afterwards only a snack, it is not considered a meal at all. If so, the prior meal is a primary meal, meaning that after the Suda Mafseket, you can still eat snacks as long as it's before Shkia. As long as it's before Shkia, you can still eat snacks even after the Suda Mafseket. Suda Mafseket has to be, I'm making a Suda, and this is my last Suda. Snacks, I can still eat afterwards. Okay? Here in the Yalkut Yosef, he says also similar to what we said. Therefore, one may sit to enjoy a large meal with several cooked foods in the early afternoon, and later on have the final meal for the fast. If one does this, one should eat the later meal. This is very important here, he adds on. No sooner than 2 hours after the earlier meal. You have to have a 2-hour gap between the end of your first meal and your second meal. All right? Because you have to come to the Suda with an appetite. You have to be eating, not that you're force feeding yourself. You have to have a Suda, which means I want to eat. So you have to have some time in between. He says the minimum of 2 hours. Right. That's what he's saying. He's basically saying this, that you shouldn't eat. Shemaya, listen. I'm going to sit down and eat a big meal. I had plov, I had salad, I had fish, whatever it is. I had a whole meal. And now I finished. Now I say, I have to make Suda Mafseket. Okay, bring it. I'm forcing myself. That's not eating. That's not considered a chila. Therefore, in order for it to be Suda Mafseket, you have to have, here in the Algos, you have to have 2 hours between the meals so that it's going to consider a Suda Mafseket. We consider it a Suda. And therefore, you're going to stay away. If you're full and you don't want to eat it and you say a bracha, that's a bracha levatala. So people should come home earlier. It's Tisha B'Av. It's Tisha B'Av. Erev Tisha B'Av. If you get into the mode, you can't just walk in. Okay, I'm here. Let's start crying. It doesn't work that way. That's why there's 3 weeks. That's why there's 9 days. That's why there's an Erev Tisha B'Av. And then there's Tisha B'Av. It's a process. It doesn't happen in one shot. You have to build to it. Okay. And you think about it, very interesting. You actually brought up a good hara. It says usually when a person dies, the avelut is stronger and then gets lighter and lighter. Right? You have the 7 days, you have the 30 days, and then you have the year. Right? And it gets lighter and lighter as the year goes by. When it comes to Tisha B'Av, it's the opposite. It starts lighter and it gets stronger. Why? Because when it's something that's a sudden loss or a current loss, something just happened right now, you feel it stronger. And then as time passes, it goes away. But if you have to remember an old sorrow, an old pain, an old problem, you have to build yourself back to that feeling. It's not going to come naturally. Therefore, we have 3 weeks, 9 days, Erev Tisha B'Av, Tisha B'Av. It's a process to get into the mode. Okay. Okay, we talked about this in the years that Tisha B'Av falls out on a Sunday. If Tisha B'Av falls on a Sunday, one may eat and drink wine at the Suda Mafseket, which is Suda Shalishi. Suda Shalishi. You can eat everything you want during Suda Shalishi. If it's Erev Tisha B'Av, you can eat like Shlomo Melech's table. There is no restrictions on that meal. Okay, moving on. So we talked about the Suda Mafseket. We're going to now go on to everyone's favorite question. I can't tell you how many times we get this question. Women who are pregnant, who are nursing, are they hayav to be fasting on Tisha B'Av or not? Says the Shulchan Aruch, source 21. Hakol chayavim litanot arbat tzomot halalu v'asel leparetz geder. Everyone has to fast all the 4 tanitim, and no one should break the fence. You shouldn't start giving exemptions. Says the Ramah, miu overet ubarot uminikot. So those who are pregnant and those who are nursing, they have great discomfort. Shemistarot harbeh ein litanot afilu einu mitzarot. They don't have to fast. Even though they're machmer, and they do fast, but he says they're not required to fast. Let's take a look in the Aruch HaShulchan. He says, "Afilu beTisha B'Av, imhem chaloshot." If they're weak and they are not likely to become ill, even without pronounced danger, they should not fast. And he says that's the distinction between Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. As on Yom Kippur, one may eat only if there is actual danger, but on Tisha B'Av, even if there is no danger, as long as they're not feeling good, they can eat. That's the Aruch HaShulchan. Let's take a look at the Piskei Tshuvot, and he writes, therefore, regarding a pregnant woman, if she's weak, particularly in the first trimester, if she has any of the following symptoms, she should not fast. So pregnant woman, if she has any of these symptoms, dizziness, insufficient blood, the hemoglobin is less than 10, heart palpitation, high or low blood pressure, infections that require antibiotics, and if she fasts, she'll have a fever, she shouldn't fast. In addition, in light of the more fragile temperament and hot weather conditions, many halachic authorities assume a lenient position and exempt a woman from fasting throughout pregnancy. However, one should certainly not be lenient without consulting an halachic authority, meaning don't go ahead and paskin yourself. I'm pregnant, I have this symptom, that symptom, and I'm potter from fasting. You have to ask your Rav if you're actually potter from fasting or not. Yalkut Yosef. Let's take a look in this source, and then we'll look in the English edition. Source 24 here. Muberet. So those pregnant women, I mean the coat, and those who are nursing. They're experiencing some side of illness. There is no sakana. So pregnant or nursing, but there is no sakana, right? But they're not feeling so well. They are not to fast on Tisha B'Av. Okay. If they have a very bad time, they should consult a chacham. It's always good to ask a chacham the question. And someone who gave birth, she has 30 days from birth, and she's pater from fasting. She doesn't have to fast at all. So anyone who gave birth within 30 days are pater from fasting. Here in the Yalkut Yosef English edition, I just want to look at this where I wanted to bring here. This is his lashon. I want to show you the lashon in this version of the Yalkut Yosef. He says over here.
Pregnant?
Let's see. Let's see. Even pregnant and nursing women who are potter from other fasts are hayav to observe the fast of Tisha B'Av, day and night. No, hayav you won't. Isha Mu'beret, he says over here, here, Vafilu Mu'beret, mit'anot u'mishnemot b'Tisha B'Av, kidin Yom Kippurim. This is what he brings down over here from the Chazon of Adya. However, he writes, it'll be called Nakum. Near Shem Yesh Lahem Eza Choli, then Patarot Militanot. If they have some sort of weakness, some sort of sickness, some sort of illness, then they're patur. So this is the way. If someone asks you, Makil, pregnant woman says, "Do I have to fast?" So you ask her, "How do you feel? How are you feeling? You have anything that's wrong? Are you okay?" She says, "I'm okay." Fast. If she says, "Sometimes I get this, sometimes I get that, sometimes like this, sometimes like that," then you can tell her she doesn't have to fast. She has Eza Choli, any type of sickness, even though it's not a sakana, she doesn't have to fast. It says the same thing with nursing. If she's good, nothing really wrong with her, she should fast. But if any type of sickness, then she's exempt from fasting. Okay. What about children? Ovadia, do you have to fast on Tisha B'Av?
Always, every day fast.
He fasts every day. Call it covered. Ovadia is a tzaddik already. Let's take a look. It's not here in the Tzurba, but outside over here on page 253 in the Yalkut Yosef English edition. This is what he says. Children, haketanim, that shehem begil pachot mi bar mitzvah. They're not bar mitzvah yet. So all of you 3 boys over here, you're not bar mitzvah. What about you? Eina mit'anim b'tzom Tisha B'Av. They are not to fast on Tisha B'Av. You heard that? You guys are not to fast. Not allowed to fast. I feel tani child, even a few hours, they should not be fasting. Barak kishegiul mitzvah. Only if they came to bar mitzvah. Only if they're 13. Then they start fasting. The boys, the girls by 12. Okay, so that's what he brings here in the Yalkut Yosef. Only after their bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, then boys and girls are chayav and fasting. They're not to fast beforehand. Now, what could you eat during that day, the children? Now that you know that you're potter from fasting on Tisha B'Av, what should you be eating? Ice cream from the freezer? You should be having the chocolates and lollipops. You should know some poskim said that children should only be eating bread and water. We don't poskim that way. You could give them to eat normal foods, but you shouldn't be indulging in foods. And the same applies to anyone who's potter. Even if there's a woman who's pregnant or nursing and she's a little not feeling well, and now she starts to eat, she should not be indulging in foods. Okay, you eat what you need to eat. She has a craving and she must have a chocolate-covered pickle. Okay, she can have a chocolate-covered pickle, but she shouldn't be indulging now in every other food. Indulging to enjoy food. You should eat not for an oinig, not to enjoy. Okay, fine. That's on children. Let's move on to our next section over here. Okay, now we're going to learn a little bit about the isurim, the stuff that are forbidden to do on Tisha B'Av. Right, so there are 5 things that we can't do, and the first one is washing. Obviously, the first one is eating and drinking. We already talked about that. Comes to the second one now is washing. You're not allowed to put your finger into water on Tisha B'Av. Dipping your finger into water. Just like in Yom Kippur, you can't dip your fingers into water. You can't do that for Tisha B'Av either. Says the Bet Yosef, V'zel Hashem Rabbeinu Yerucham, Hiskimu Bali HaTosot, Shenot L'Yad HaShachar Mikol Malkum Tzarech Lizar Shalito El Atzoy Tishrei Etzbeotav V'lo Chol Hayad V'Hachi Naktinam. Even though the Gemara says you can't even dip your fingers into water, however, we do say we wash our hands, the Tilat Yadayim, in the morning. But we're not going to wash all the way up to our wrists, which we usually do, because halachically, you only really have to wash up to your knuckles. So since today you're not allowed to, on Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to put your fingers into water. So therefore, we wash only up to the knuckle. Says the Shulchan Aruch, source 27. That's 27. Naitul Adam Yadav Shachrit. With Sarach Lizar Shelo Yitel Yadav Ela Atsoif Kishre Etzboisa. He should only go up to his knuckles. The knuckles up here, right? The last set of knuckles. That's where he washes to. What about a kohen? So we have kohanim. We Sephardim who follow Chacham Ovadia, we wear tefillin in the morning, right? We're going down in a minute. But since we wear tefillin in the morning, we do kohanim in the morning and at mincha because it's a ta'anit. Now kohanim, when they wash their hands, how much of their hands do they wash? Full hand, right? So v'chein kohen ha'oil leducha notel yadav, says the Rama, afa pisha hein taharot, so the Ramah says they're allowed to wash their hands. Why? Because they're washing for a mitzvah. They're not washing to enjoy. Therefore, a Kohen is allowed to wash his entire hand. He says again, Shari Tshuva, that the Natiyah of a Kohen for the Birkat Kohanim must be to the joint of the hand to the arm, up into the wrist, since it's required by the letter of the law. It's required for Kohanim to wash up to the wrist, therefore they wash up to the wrist. What about you, Mr. Levi over here? Okay, you guys are Leviim, and you have to wash the hands of a Kohen, and you wash your hands first. So what do? So in some places, the custom, the Levi pours the water on the hands of the Kohanim. When fulfilling this custom, the Levi must wash his hands first. Therefore, you should wash it even on Yom Kippur and on Tisha B'Av. However, it's limited. The Kohanim wash up to the wrist. The Levi washes up to their knuckles only. So when the Levi goes and prepares his hands to wash the Kohen, the Levi washes up to his knuckles. And the Kohen goes the whole hand. Okay, that's the halacha, the Kohen and the Levi for Kohanim. Now, the Ramah said an interesting idea. He said if it's not for enjoyment, you're allowed to wash. Shulchan Aruch says a similar idea. Im hayu yodav, it's dirty. It's with filth and mud. You're allowed to wash your hand to take off the dirt. The problem with washing is to enjoy the washing. But if you're doing it to remove the dirt, okay, the guy was walking outside, he didn't realize his hands touched something dirty. So what is he going to do now? I can't wash my hands, and he's not going to wash his hands the whole Tisha B'Av? No, he could wash his hands because he's just removing the dirt. The dirt. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, just like you're allowed to remove the dirt. Noshim hamshalot v'tzrichem lechotz habasar after mamela rechotzot gam yedeihem mutar. So too, when ladies are cooking in the house, they're allowed to wash the vegetables with their hands because they're cooking. They're not doing it to enjoy the washing. They're doing it to prepare food, right? So after chatzot, when ladies get up and they start preparing the food, they're allowed to be washing it because they're not washing it to enjoy it. They're washing it to remove the dirt. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah in source 32. Mashma the Mazeya Harba. The guy sweats a lot. He wants to remove the sweat by washing up. Mutter, it's permissible. Because it's not a pleasurable washing. So the Mishnah Berurah brings down. They're allowed to wash off sweat. Nevertheless, Mishnah Berurah only permits washing on this earth only for an istinus. Right? An istinus is someone who's very sensitive. Right? Today, a lot of people are considered very sensitive. Right? Says the Mishnah Berurah, someone who's not very sensitive. So I tell you the truth. If anyone is an istinus, I'm probably an istinus. Okay, I'm on this. Probably an istinus. I take a shower sometimes more than once a day, sometimes twice, sometimes three, depending on how much I'm at the sweat or whatever. I don't feel comfortable. And my wife and kids over there, why is taking so many showers? This is me. But Baruch Hashem is giving me the koach that on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, somehow I manage without having to take any showers. It's interesting. I feel very oily at the end of the day, but and sweaty and oily, but so I think most people can manage it. I don't know if anyone's at such a level of an istiness. I don't know anyone who needs to really take a shower even on Tisha B'Av. Okay. First of all, it's a day of a churban, so you can look messed up. I like a nice wave on my hair. Tisha B'Av, it's okay. Your hair can be a little messy. You're sitting during a churban. If you're really thinking about the churban, you're not getting worried about your hair. You're not getting worried about your beard. You're not getting worried about your look. You're sitting in pain. The guy who lost his relative, he's not thinking about the way he looks. So you can make it through. And Yom Kippur, well, Abdul is also, it's a day you become an angel. Angels aren't worried about the prachoska and how they look and whatnot. So it's also, you're able to go through it. The rest of the year, it's a different story. The rest of the year, you're human again, and you're b'simcha, you have to take care of yourself, you take care of yourself. People, you're able to manage. You're able to manage. One day, most people are able to manage. Hashem should give us the koach that we shouldn't feel too sensitive on those days. Okay. So now the Shara Tzion, he wants to say that there's a Bach and Taz and Pichodosh who are more strict. And they say it's not just, because right now you want to say if you're washing not for pleasure, it's allowed. Shara Tzion says no. Washing to remove dirt, that's allowed. Washing that's not for pleasure, that's still not allowed. And they say it's important to be strict like that. What about a wet towel? So says the Ramah, mutter l'shot mapav v'mayim be'erev Tisha B'Av u'motzeim in mayim v'hi mitnagavet. They become mostly dry. You put it in, then you take it out, you let it dry a little bit. You may use that to wash to wash his face, hands, and feet. Even if he's doing it for pleasure. This is not considered wet, it's considered dry. So here in the Al Yosef, in the English edition of page 54, he says, to wet a cloth on the day before Tisha B'Av, allow it to dry and be slightly moist, like most moist towelettes. Sometimes on the plane, they give you, right, moist towelettes. You buy those, you can have them. They are also permissible to be used because they're mostly dry, and it's just to enjoy the cool feel of the moist cloth. But if it's too wet, you can't use it. Okay, if it's too wet, you can't use it. It says here in the Dirshu edition of the Mishnah Berurah on source 36, concerning washing dishes on Tisha B'Av. Okay, for Tisha B'Av, you had a full sink, you didn't get a chance to finish it. You don't have your dishwasher, so now you want to wash dishes on Tisha B'Av. If a person does not need them that day, it's forbidden to wash them. Don't start washing dishes if you don't need them on Tisha B'Av. It's not a day to washing dishes. Says the Or L'Tzion that one should not wash dishes which he does not presently need, as doing so distracts his mind from the morning. You're supposed to be thinking about the Churban all day, all right? Not to get your mind off the Churban. Just get your mind on the Churban. Therefore, don't wash if you don't need it. After Chatzot already, you can do everything you need to do in order to prepare the meal. That we already know. 256, 33 here in the Yalkut Yosef. Okay, it says the same thing. If a woman is cooking on Tisha B'Av and she needs to rinse off the meat, she may do so. This is not considered an act of washing her hands. And we'll end off this section with the Penina Halacha. Penina Halacha says, "V'chein isha shemchina ma'achalim likot sof tzom olidea v'shiot l'shot v'shem kach ma'achalim v'kelim mipnei she'ein zo ruchita shel ta'anod." Person is preparing to break the fast after Chatzot. He may rinse the food, he may rinse the dishes, because she's not enjoying the washing. She's preparing for the food and her to remove the dirt of the food and the other things like that. No, that you can't do. You can't taste it on Tisha B'Av. You can't say I need to see the spices. The spices. Our women, Baruch Hashem, they don't need to taste it. They don't even need to know the recipes. They go by the eye. They say I do everything by the eye. Right? I used to ask I remember in my grandmother's house, her kilins, her daughter-in-laws would ask her, how you make this? You say you put in salt. How much? You look, you know. Yeah, and that's it. That's the way it was done. You don't have to taste it. All right. Let's move into our next section. We have a few more minutes. See how much we can get done. Let's take a look. Learning Torah. Learning Torah. Also, likra b'tar b'nevim ktuvim v'lishna mishnah b'tav v'midrash v'halachas v'agadas. Right? That's the Gemara Masechet Tanit. You're not allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av because, right? Torah brings simcha. Right? It brings simcha to a person. All right. The Mishnah said, the Gemara says, but you can learn something that's very hard you never learned before because you're not going to have any enjoyment trying to understand that. You're not going to be able to understand it. You can learn sad stuff like Eov, Dvar Marayim Sheba Yirmiyah, and the bad prophecies that are in Yirmiyah. And they closed the yeshivas. No learning that day. Therefore, you can't learn Torah on Tisha B'Av. Says the Shulchan Aruch. They closed down the yeshiva. If they have comforting stuff, you have to skip them. So you can learn sad things on Tisha B'Av. On Tisha B'Av, there are stuff that are said that you are allowed to learn. In the Alka Joseph English edition, he says some other things that you're allowed to learn. You're allowed to learn Midrash Eicha, or you take out the stuff that are not talking about the destruction. You're allowed to read about the Gemara, Maseches Gittin talks about the destruction. You're allowed to learn Moed Katan. That's about from page 21a, which starts the Avelut halachot. You're allowed to learn halachot of Avelut. Also, they bring down that you're allowed to learn. What else are you allowed to learn? You're allowed to learn Musar. You're allowed to learn Musar to improve one's behavior. But you shouldn't go too deep into it, and then you'll start to enjoy it. But rather, you should learn what you're doing wrong to fix yourself. So a lot of these places nowadays, I remember when I was growing up, we didn't have this. Baruch Hashem, they have it today. Because in the olden days, people didn't know what to do. So they wanted to not feel the fast. They would put on the screen. Today, Baruch Hashem, a lot of the shuls, a lot of the yeshivot, they have a marathon of speakers. Everybody comes and gives speeches. Now, you ask, how can that be? You're not allowed to learn Torah. There's a lot of Torah that you're allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av. You just have to find the right books, find the right stuff that you're allowed to learn. And it shouldn't be a day that's wasted. Right? It should be a day that you should learn what you're allowed to learn on that day to feel the Tzurba. Okay. The Kaf HaChaim writes as well. What happens if a person gets a chidush on Tisha B'Av? Or he heard a chidush? Can you write them down? Is it permitted or not? Like learning Torah. But it came. He's learning what he's allowed to learn. And it comes a chidush. And now chidush came. What did he do? So Kaf HaChaim says, it's going to be a simcha, so you shouldn't write it down. And there, it's only one day, it's a few hours, he'll remember it. But if he's really worried he's going to forget it, then you could write it down. If he's going to really forget it, then you could write it down. Okay. The Torah writes that the Rambam would pull out certain parts of the tefillah. Why we have in the Korbanot section, we have Ezu Mikuman. That's Mishnah, right? You have Rabbi Shmuel Omer. It's a Braita. You have Torah Sheba'al Peh. You're not allowed to learn Torah on Tisha B'Av. So the Ramban will put it out. The Ramban pulled it out. The Torah says, I don't think that's correct. And a person should daven as he regularly davens and shouldn't be chayshish about it. it's learning, but it's not really learning. It's davening. So says the Shulchan Aruch, "Umuter likrot kol seder hayom, or Pashat HaKarbanot, or Mishnat Ezu Mekaman, or Midrash Rabbi Yishmael." You're allowed to do all of that on Tisha B'Av. You're allowed to daven regularly, everything. You don't have to pull it out saying this is Torah and you're not allowed to learn it. You're allowed to do all of that. Here in the Alka Yosef, he says that as well. It's permissible to recite all the passages that have been instituted to our daily prayers. Korbanot, Ezo Mikuman, Rabbi Ishmael, all that it's allowed to be read as a regular shacharit. However, some stuff that you can't do. You cannot do Chokli Israel. Someone who has a daily Chokli Israel, he cannot do it on Tisha B'Av. That is not permissible. Tehillim is always a big question. Tehillim, can you say Tehillim on Tisha B'Av or not? In the end of the day, there's two ideas here. Really, you should not be reading Tehillim on Tisha B'Av. Because it's not one of the permissible things to read and learn. A person today, so they used to say, if you don't have what else to do, rather say Tehillim, they do something wrong. But today, because you have all these events, and you have all these books, and you have all these sources, you have Torah Anytime, you have iTorah.com, you have all these different sources that have Hazak and all these other places that have all these things, it's impossible to say you have nothing else to listen to or do. So at this point, it becomes very questionable if one can read Tehillim on Tisha B'Av. I've heard some say after Chatzot it's more permissible. But again, here he brings down that when they asked the Chacham Ovadia, he said one should not be lenient and recite Tehillim on Tisha B'Av. Even if he doesn't know how to learn anything else, he should still not read Tehillim. He should find something that he's allowed to read. So again, there are those who say it's okay after Chatzot, like that. But on the first point, it's better not to read Tehillim if the person doesn't have to.
The mitzvah of Shnai Mikra Mechet Targum is allowed or no?
So here the Ramah says, Mutar L'Sar Pasha B'Tisha B'Av. It's permissible to do that on Tisha B'Av. I'm not entirely sure what we do. I'm not entirely sure if we do that. What is that? To do Shnai Mikra on Tisha B'Av. What does he say here in the notes? Yeah, the Mishnah Brewer said it's only about Kaira. There's a lot of practices reading. But not a regular person. Yeah, not to do that. Here in the Yalkut Yosef, I didn't see him bring it down. Shnai Mikra Chatarmis, I didn't see it. Do you know anything else, Malkiel? You saw anything else?
No, it said at the end of that 17 note.
Yeah, I would say not to, because if we're saying no to Tehillim, I would also say no to
right. It seems like there is some kind of enjoyment.
Yeah, Targum also not to do that day. You should learn something that's permissible on that day. Stuff that we mentioned that are allowed. It says the Yalkut Yosef in source 43. Ein likrot Tehillim Tisha B'Av. V'amekel b'zeh yesh lo mal lismay. You have what to rely on. Avachok Yisrael, the seder ma'amodos, yesh ma'achim mishul lo likrot b'Tisha B'Av. V'imul rago b'hem kol hayom. V'ayim misayit tefillah sheshel yom ein keloenu b'tim ha'ktaris k'mo b'chol yom. So here Yalkut Yosef says Tehillim you shouldn't read. The person did. He had what to rely on. Okay, now about tefillin. Okay, so interestingly, usually Chacham Ovadia is very much like the Shulchan Aruch, right? Rav Karo, Shulchan Aruch says you follow him. When it comes to wearing tefillin on Tisha B'Av, and the later generations now, I remember when I was younger, we did not, most Sephardic shuls, at least that I was around, we put tefillin on mincha time, like the Ashkenazim, like the Shulchan Aruch says to do. But today, we've learned from Chacham Ovadia that we should put tefillin on in the morning. And apparently that was the minhag. Yeah, you could do it twice. Yeah, every time you put on tefillin, you say bro. So Chacham Ovadia showed that the minhag in Eretz Yisrael and amongst the Mekubalim in Eretz Yisrael, minhag was always to put on tefillin during Shacharit on Tisha B'Av. So it predates the custom of the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so the Beit Yosef writes, "Tefillin Shacharit and Mincha Menichim Otav." Tisha B'Av, you put it on during Mincha. Brings it down in Allah Shulchan Aruch. Tisha B'Av, Ben Shacharit, no talit, no tefillin, but you do it at Mincha instead. The Ben Ish Chai, Mekubal, he said no. You put on talit tefillin, Rashi Rabbeinu Tam in the morning, but you do it at home. You do it at home. I know some Syrians have this minhag. They put on the tefillin at home, they pray shacharit at home, and then they go to the shul and they repeat the Shemona Esrei out loud in the shul without the tefillin. I've seen them do that. So they pray b'yachid at home up until Shemona Esrei, Talis and Tefillin, and then they take it over. They come to shul and they repeat Shemona Esrei without the Talis and Tefillin. We who follow now Chacham Ovadia, what do we do? Meaning Yerushalayim Tval Shachar b'Tisha B'Av im hatzibur, with the tzibur b'talit u'tefillin. That's what we do. Like every single day. Those who do this are doing right. He says those who do like Shulchan Aruch can do like Shulchan Aruch. But he says it's important that each shul should be everyone together. Shouldn't be half the shul not wearing tefillin and half the shul wearing tefillin. So in this shul, we don't do that. We in this shul put on tefillin in the morning. That means yes, means everybody who comes Shacharit Tisha B'Av should be wearing the tefillin in the morning. Shouldn't make themselves separate. You see someone not putting it on, you don't have to tell him anything. He decided himself that he doesn't want to do it. I won't make a fight about it. But halacha l'maisa, if someone asks to put on tefillin in the morning, we who follow Chacham Ovadia put tefillin on in the morning. This shul puts on tefillin in the morning. Everyone who davens in the shul should put on tefillin in the morning on Tisha. Ben Ish Chai says you put on tefillin in the morning. He just says you put it on at home. But the Mekubalim, everyone put it on. Not only, I don't know what they go according to. I don't know Moroccans. I know what I do. Because if I don't know what I do, no one else knows what I do. Not only this, Chacham Ovadia says that if you put on Rabbeinu Tam every day, you put on Rabbeinu Tam in the morning as well. Everything that we do every day with our tefillin, we do the same thing on Tisha B'Av. No changes to the tefillin routine. Okay. I'm just going to read that to you from right here, page 292. Those who have the practice of putting on Rabbeinu Tam every day also do it on Tisha B'Av. Okay. We'll finish up. Over here, we have the practice to remove the parochet from the Aron HaKodesh on Tisha B'Av. Everyone, it's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch. It's brought down in the Kitta Shulchan Aruch, but we also those that brought down in the Yalkut Joseph as well. That's our minhag to take down the parochet. We say Anenu and Nachem in all three prayers of Tisha B'Av. Some people don't do that in all three. We do it in all three. Okay, we'll stop over here. Everyone's welcome to continue reading the rest on their own. All right. Kaddish Isa.
Thank you.
No,